Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I want to thank I'm Josie. I'm from the Brewmore committee that organized this event. I want to thank our speakers this morning. Well, I guess it wasn't this morning, earlier today. They were amazing. And if you're anything like me, probably your head is just like whirling with ideas right now. So we'll move into the second part of today's event, which is more active. Um, we'll get a chance to do our workshops in breakout rooms, and we're going to be guided by three esteemed professionals in this area. Samantha Parks from Georgia State University, Greg Crowther from Everett Community College, and Amy Dunbar-Wallis from the University of Nebraska. So before we dive into our actual workshops where we're really getting our hands dirty, we're gonna have a panel discussion with our three workshop leaders. So if Samantha, Greg, and Amy could all join me with their cameras on, and why don't we start by having each of you introduce yourself, just a few words about your position and what your research interests are and what you're going to be leading us through in the workshop today.
So I don't mind starting and going. I'm very organizationally focused. So if I'm on the left, I'm going to start that way. I am Samantha Parks. Nice to meet you. I'm coming to you from Atlanta and Georgia State University. And my research holds two hats. So in my course-based research, we focus on essential oils, herbs, and spices and how those facilitate antibiotic resistance and sensitivity. So super exciting. And my grad student is currently at micro presenting without me, but that's okay. I'm not bitter. On the other side, I'm really focused on STEM literacy. So I focus on how we can improve that as a way to improve our learning outcomes, both in course-based research experiences and in more traditional classes. And that's actually what I'm going to be presenting on today. We're going to be talking about scaffolding and double entry notebooks and how those two processes really help to drive student understanding and engagement, hopefully building off of both keynotes a little bit this morning, talking about competency and understanding and applying that information.
Hi, I'm Amy Dunbar-Wallis. I'm a researcher at University of Nebraska. I work with Dr. Jenny Dower, and I'm working more broadly with the science and decision making for a complex world class. I come from a research background where I study community engaged and field-based cures for students. The organisms that we work with are apple trees and bees, so much larger scale. So we have a lot of fun doing that, yes. One of the best outcomes from this community engaged work, particularly at the apple trees, worked with many cohorts of students, but we've now had 2 apple orchards established out of this work with the cures. So I'm very excited about that. Um, what my actual research is how and why are instructors getting involved in teaching cures? And what are these outcomes for the students who are in these civically engaged and community engaged cures? So today in our workshop, we'll be talking about science civic engagement, what that looks like, and how we can support you in making your cures more community engaged if they're not already. So thank you for having me today.
Okay, and that leaves me. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Crowther. I'm an A&P instructor at Everett Community College north of Seattle. So anatomy and physiology, classic survey courses where we blast through all of the body's organ systems in 10 weeks. And in that context, we don't seem to have time for cures. So I'm one of the least experienced people here in terms of cures, but my research interests, to the extent that I have any at a community college, are focused on better assessment, specifically better summative exams. Think classic pen and paper style things that you do in the classroom. So I have some, knowledge and expertise there. And in this session, I will try and, with you, try and say, does that approach that I and colleagues have come up with have anything to say about testing in the context of a class with a cure in it. So you can help me think through that, and I look forward to doing so.
Oh, this is awesome. I am so excited. These all sound amazing. I wish I could go to all three. So I think for the discussion panel, I mean, the three of you have very different interests and expertise, but I think that'll make for a really nice discussion because we'll be able to get some diverse perspectives. So I think it would be great to have the audience write in with questions. I and the other Roomware members could be monitoring questions in the chat and then pitching them to you guys. And then we could maybe get like all three of your perspectives on each question as they come in. So I really, we just sat through a couple hours of sort of lecture type of things. And I think it would be great if we get more audience participation. Of course, since I was running this, I had to write up some questions to get the ball rolling. And I definitely have some things that I've been thinking about that I would love to hear your opinions on. So, one thing I wrote in the chat during the last talk, and this has been on my mind a lot, is like my students have so much anxiety if I ask them to do something that they haven't done before, or if it's like unexpected or unconventional. So I would love it if you guys could tell me your thoughts about getting student buy-in and just like maybe just lowering the anxiety barrier for them a little bit.
So I'll jump in. This is such a common issue, and I don't think there's ever going to be a full fix first. Um, but one of the ways that we have tried to alleviate some of that is by really highlighting formative versus summative assessment. So we have built in all of these stops along the way where it's quote a due date or an assignment, but we are very open with students that it's formative. And we are working together, especially in a course where we're doing research together and they're working in groups, to be able to show something and just get a you did it check. Now let's get it improved, right? So we saw a beautiful word cloud from Stephanie, and then my students would show a word cloud, and then others would show word clouds where they had changed color or format or imagery, and they start talking and collaborating on how to improve that. And just that little bit of a shift towards formative, collaborative types of assignments before a summative one really seems to help alleviate a little bit of that anxiety. Not at the start. They have to go through that process at least once to realize, okay, she's really not giving me a score here. I'm really just getting help. And so that's how we've started to address that.
For us, a lot of the work that we do is outside with students, and they are doing field ecology. And a lot of them are having anxiety about being outside. And can I do this? Is it going to be too hot? Is it going to be sticky? Am I going to mess up? And we do a lot of talk, especially in the vans on the way. The vans are a really great place to get to know the students, for them to get to know each other, and to actually we get to actually hear more of their anxiety because they're talking to each other about what's coming up. And just having that informal time to address concerns has been really useful. Our students go through multiple iterations of taking data because they're taking data on ecosystem services types things. We want to measure them over time, and they know that the data that they're collecting is going to be used by students at schools all across the region. So knowing that they are accountable to other peers that they don't see has been really big. It does make them anxious up front, but then they have buy-in of like, oh, this is important. Other people are counting on us for this. They also know that at the end of the semester, they are going to be presenting posters at a symposium. And that's actually what gives them the most anxiety is, oh no, these people are going to look at me that I'm supposed to be an expert and I'm not an expert. And we tell the students, be honest with the people you're talking to. Tell them, say, hey, I'm a first year student and this was my first research experience, but this is what I learned. And answer questions to the best of their ability. That tell them to never feel shame or embarrassment about where they are right now. That we're all growing together through this.
Yeah, and just to add to these answers, in the context of high stakes exams in particular, this is a great question for that, right? Because students often freak out about them, especially my pre-nursing students who need certain grades in A&P to apply successfully to a nursing program. So I think a couple of things that you might see if you attend my workshop. We are trying to, I would say, do two broad things. One is build up a lot of trust about how the exam will go for the students. So we're in our methods, our exam preview approach, we're revealing a lot of details of what the exam questions will be like. And then we honor those commitments and we stick to what we said, including maybe retake options if we're prepared to offer those. So try and provide lots of information up front to reduce the anxiety about like, oh, what is he going to ask about, you know? And then related to that, and part of that is providing lots of practice examples with a mechanism for allowing students to create their own additional practice examples if they feel the need. So I think one of our blind spots in biology historically has been we do one example for the students, and then maybe the next time they see a problem of that type is on the exam itself. And they thought they understood the one example, but turns out they didn't completely. So I feel like we need to make it easier for students to practice 2 or 3 or 4 times on a certain type of problem if they need that. And I have some data that I won't be presenting today suggesting that that's important. So overall, building trust in how exams will work and making it more doable for them to get lots of practice examples if they want.
Okay, well, while we wait for some audience questions, I'll ask my second question because it already sort of came up and it's, oh, wait, Adam.
Thanks, Josie. I mean, I'm happy I can wait till you ask yours, but I can ask my question. So this is a question about uh, uh, it's an issue we have about when we have to grade students within the cure that we teach, because my approach is that the point of teaching a research course is to get to the point where the students have results. And if the results are sort of publishable, and the gauge of being publishable is they have to post them on this online database. And for a different course, it's that they create an annotation that we can submit to GenBank. Then they've succeeded, and so that's like full marks, right? And so most of the assessments are like that, and so all the students do incredibly well. And we could differentiate them more by adding like an exam, but that's not really the point of the course. And it's not really the outcome that we're interested in. And it doesn't actually measure whether or not you can be successful as a scientist, which is what we're trying to teach them about being an independent scientist. And so we struggle with like how to do it. And we could put more emphasis on a lab report or something, but we don't have the time to grade those, I think. And also they could easily just be copied because they're all doing the same sort of project. So it's almost not worth giving that sort of assessment. So I'd love your thoughts about it. Is it fine that everyone gets great grades, or how you would approach it, or how you have approached it?
Can I start on this one? Sorry, I guess I'm just going to start because I think you're raising this important issue of, so I just said, I'm focusing on these high stakes tests and making them better. And so Adam's question is in a way sort of a response to that of like, I don't really necessarily want to give a high stakes test or a formal lab report. Is that okay? And so my short answer is yes. It's all about your LOs and how you're going to assess those fairly and well. So to be clear, my session is more aimed at people who either have external pressure or an internal desire to give these kind of classroom in-class tests. But that's absolutely not for everyone, not for every course. And I won't judge you at all if you're saying, my LOs don't really go there. So no problem from my end.
I agree
Yeah,
about.
I would just respond. I wasn't at all trying to. It's more that the course is demanding experimentally for like time in the lab, and so it's like we don't want to detract from that by having a high stakes exam. So
I agree about focusing on the learning objectives. And one of the things that that can be concerning with cures where if they're graded on whether or not they have publishable results is accuracy and I don't want to say integrity, but the kind of integrity to the what's going on. I think so. I worked with Be the Cure in Arizona, where the students are doing DNA barcoding, and then they upload their results to the Barcode of Life database, which is really cool. So you've got community college students who are published researchers with these bees, and it's amazing. But we had many students who they got nothing back, that they messed up in their PCR steps and it was hard, but they learned a ton. So getting them to be able to talk in their posters less about, hey, I discovered this bee, and more about, okay, I iterated. I was able to go back and figure out what I did wrong. And this is how I fixed these procedures so that next time the next person behind me will be able to get good results. That's, also part of science. And we really want to get these students into the culture of science and start off performing well and being okay with having setbacks and knowing that it's okay to iterate.
And I'm going to follow up and say yes and on all of that. So my learning outcomes are very process oriented. Now, that process is also focused on proceeding towards data. My graduate student has 1 year left, and she is very, very driven to get this work published. So she's driving a lot with our students, and we're trying to get that data. But I do not do exams, but I do a lot of assessments related to science process. So our work with microbes, we're finding novel bacteria and going all the way through phylogeny and then metabolic pathway testing, antibiotic resistance testing, and finding new genes related to antibiotic resistance. This cannot be done in a semester. So a huge focus for us is on lab notebooks. And so this is a process-based skill. The first few times they turn it in, they're a little bit train wrecky. But we keep working to improve them because the next cohort of students absolutely needs that, right? And then we've learned that our students cannot go from reading a manuscript, designing an experiment, and then putting their data on a poster. Like that does not happen. So we have scaffolded and we have assessments throughout. Are you building good figures for your poster? Are you doing good work along that path? And so we do have a lot of assessments that happen. Most of them are designed, though, to give us a good outcome. And I will tell you, we do group lab reports. So it's individual lab notebooks. And I don't want to see anything that anybody else did in there, but they do group lab reports, a group poster, and a group meta-analysis. So there's a combination of both. And it's something that the students can actually see grades over the course of the semester. We've had a lot of grade anxiety if it's just something that's coming at the end. All that to be said, our CURE students, unless they just completely disappear, their grades tend to be very high. And my thought is that's indicative of the effort they're putting in.
That was exactly my question. Thank you so much, Adam, for asking it. I just want to put out there that, like, I mean, I guess you're always going to have students who are just more invested than other students in any given class. I'm just wondering if for some students, knowing that their performance is tied to a good grade somehow, if that can be a motivator for them. Like I don't want to completely just promise everyone an A if they just, it's like I want them to do the work in the cure. They have to just like do their fly work to get a good grade. But for some of them, there seems to be more of a hurdle to like getting really engaged with it or like having ownership or like really doing it well and like caring really like whether they're, doing it perfectly, assiduously. I don't know if any of the panelists have any opinions about that further.
Our cures are in introductory biology, and most of the students that we work with view these cures as a gateway to getting more research experience. And so it is, we haven't assessed their motivation or their goal orientation, but what we are hearing from these students and seeing long term, just from getting to work with them over multiple semesters, is that they want research experience. Our students in particular want field-based experience, and they haven't been able to find that prior with their other classes. A lot of their classes are bench-based, which is wonderful, but they do want to be able to get outside and do some research in those ways. So I think that for us, it's a great gateway and less about, hey, I know I'm going to get an A in this class, because we don't give all of our students, I mean, our students don't all earn A's, I should say. So
I'll say for us, this is more of a mid to upper level. We're trying to scaffold with some freshmen, but we're talking sophomores through grad students. And once they get trained, can come in all hours. So we were talking a little bit about self-efficacy and feeling like a scientist. That's a huge motivator for them. And when we do have a few that are falling off, we use Slack as a communication tool for everyone in the lab. Each group getting their own channel with the TA and myself in there, and they will call each other out. So it's more related to that feeling like a scientist, that science identity and peer pressure that we hope engages them to work.
That is a great idea. I'll have to figure out how to use Slack. Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually had a question about, it's been touched on a little bit, but one of the outcomes from cures can really be enhancing scientific communication. And I just wanted your thoughts on, I've heard you talk about posters, lab reports, and we just had a summer institute at my university about artificial intelligence and competency in AI and how you're communicating science. And I guess this huge area is like, what are the different ways in which you have the students do your scientific communication, and then how do you teach them best practice in incorporating AI in that? So, right, really easy one.
No, yeah, totally easy. And hi, by the way. So we use a wide variety of different communications. So we have, and I think it was Adam, you said that you don't have time to grade, right? There's so many people in there. And if I'm misquoting who said that, I apologize. But we do a lot live together where we're doing presentations, where we'll have, some aspects of journal club where students will share a slide and walk through a figure or help to analyze a paper or present a new method. And so they're getting that informal presentation, talking to each other. They'll start building figures for a poster over time, going into a full poster later. We do double entry notebooks, which I will cover in the workshop in a little bit. We do papers, but we write them in pieces. So we start with a proposal with an abstract and introduction to help the students focus, which hopefully they then go ahead and revise as the semester continues. Oh, I'll help you with that though. In other words, they think they know what their abstract will be, and then they quickly realize, oh, I had no idea, or those primers didn't work. I had to pivot to a different gene, right? So they learn to edit over time. And so we have all these piecemeal pieces to get them used to communicating and writing, and in different modalities. Regarding AI, this is something that I have a kind of a burning desire to work on. keep your eyes peeled for Jimby, and Greg and I will be talking about that at some point regarding AI in education. And I think for our students, I use it as a tool to get them started. And I am very open with them that if they write purely in AI, we can tell it's not going to be a hard sell there. But if you don't feel confident, if you don't know how to get started, it's a good scaffolding process, right? You start and think, oh, well, wait a second, AI got this wrong. This term is wrong. This reference doesn't even exist, right? And it's an editing tool for them. So to me, it's a STEM literacy teaching tool, not something for an end product.
I'll add on to that that we also do everything in a very stepwise manner as our students are going through the semester, and they're developing their poster for the symposium all throughout the semester. But our students also have the extra benefit of they are talking to community members out in the field in open space areas and in orchards. They're mixing with people who are not scientists, they come from all different backgrounds, and they don't necessarily know what questions community members will ask of them. And so they are learning on the fly how to talk about science, how to talk about what their interests are with community members during the class time. So that's been really wonderful. Where AI has come up for us is when our students are, so our introductory class, they are um, being introduced to quantitative reasoning. And this, for a lot of our students, it's the first time that they'll use R or R Studio. And we talk to them about using AI to help debug their code, to help demystify doing the coding. The AI can't write the code for them, and we're not feeding it data, but it is helping them learn how to find, common mistakes with R. Like, is there a double space where there shouldn't be? Is there a comma where there shouldn't be? But AI also helps them figure out what sort of visualization do I want with this data, and trying it out and seeing if it works. So it's actually helping to test them with their quantitative reasoning. And we do tell the students, yes, we can tell if AI has written something. That's only really come up with one student before. And so I'm hoping that the students will see it as something that will help them be stronger scientists and not a replacement for their own thinking.
Wondering if I have anything useful to add here. Maybe I'll just briefly say science communication, so many possible goals there in terms of like, can you make good figures? Can you speak to different audiences? I just want to generally say, in general, rubrics are your friend for really emphasizing whatever your values and priorities are and helping the students feel like you are fairly assessing them about the things that you care about. And on the AI front, um, our school, like many, has an ongoing task force working on this, and I heard from them just last week, and they had two broad ideas for like confirming the integrity of student work. And one was the receipts approach, they called it, where you're just gathering info from them at many steps of the way, as you would do by, say, checking their lab notebook, so that what you get at the end is not just this thing that somebody generated, but you've had all the intermediate steps. And their other approach was, I forget what they called it, what their catchphrase was, but it was basically they submit like a written lab report or the equivalent, but then they have to, and that's not graded, but then they orally defend it and explain it and field questions. So in that way, you can hopefully confirm that they really understood what they submitted.
Yeah,
I thought those were very nice.
I think the oral approach is great because, and again, if they're doing a poster and they have the figures but can't explain how they got there, that's, really demonstrates that it's not generated by their human thoughts. It's something else that may have occurred. So thank you.
Those are great ideas. There's a related question in the chat. I feel like we kind of covered a lot of this, but I want to just acknowledge the question. It's from Jean-Francois Hamel. Hamel. Sorry about my accent. It says, students have made increasing use of Gen AI tools when producing reports. How do we preserve the student creativity and authorship of a report in this new context? How do we design assignments and assessments to evaluate a written report? So I guess if there's anything any of the panelists want to add about specifically like lab reports, I guess. You know, I mean, Samantha, it was interesting when you said you felt like you could identify it right away, because for me, I'm not 100% sure that that's true. I don't know. So maybe, I don't,
So, full disclosure, I started teaching in elementary and then in high school. And at the beginning of that, I couldn't identify plagiarism and cheating if you paid me. In fact, I thought I had the most brilliant students ever. And when I told my department chair, I mean, this is going back into the early 90s, she went, "Oh, you're cute." And then we, pulled it up and were able to check. So it has taken decades to get there. Um, for I can tell because the sentences don't all make sense together and very often include examples that we've never covered. There have been extensive issues with references in AI, with references that don't exist. I'm seeing that I had a very frustrated kiddo, my son, where he had done a report and he had pulled up references, but the AI titles and authors and years were all wrong. They didn't exist. So he was doing a deep dive to find that. And so we started playing with AI and references. So the way that I check is I look at the verbiage. Does it just seem a little plasticky and off? And then I typically will check references and see, do they all exist? Um, and that's been the biggest tell. There are also some websites where you can put in, if you have a suspected paper, you can see how much does it look like it was AI generated. Now, in deference to what Greg said, I at my university cannot turn around and accuse a student of plagiarism or academic dishonesty based on that, to be very clear. But we would have a very frank conversation. I'm not including you on a manuscript or at the poster that's being presented at Microbe if I can't trust your work. And that, I don't want to call it a threat, but that understanding seems to help students. But I had a student where English was a second language. She did not feel confident in how she could articulate her findings. And she was using AI and then editing it. And there were a few times that I had to say, edit a little more, make it your own words. If this is how you're starting, you need to get better at progressing through. And so I look for the tells and then I have a conversation with them.
that's really helpful. Excellent. We have another question not on the topic of AI, from Renee Geck. She asks, are there certain types of assessments or assignments that you try to use together in a course, or have found that work well together? For example, if you have two very different types, because some students who struggle with one may do well on another.
Yeah, we do oral exams out in the field where the students are walking us through what they're doing when it comes to like the process. So when they're talking about their data collection, then we also do have kind of just standard testing for students, but we also do two-stage testing for the students where they will do their own individual part of the exam, and then the second part of the exam is a group exam where they have to work together to solve a problem or to answer a question.
So we use a wide variety. I think I've touched on a lot of them already, but especially something like a double entry notebook where you're going from basic notes and quotes to analysis, application, and usability. Things like posters will combine figure design. So, how are they representing their data? Are their stats correct? And then ending up with a poster where they get scored both on what the poster looks like, but also how well they can defend their poster at a presentation. So we do pair things, but they tend to travel with the students the entire semester to give them that chance to improve.
I just put a link in the chat to someone who uses what she calls multiple grading schemes, which is, I think, somewhat related to what we're talking about. Students with different strengths, how do they have a chance to demonstrate their strengths?
Awesome. Okay, and then my last question that I had prepared in advance that I was kind of just wondering about because, I mean, we're all here because we're interested in, to some extent at least, in discipline-based education research and using evidence-based strategies to inform our teaching. So I'm kind of curious, how much of that do you share with your students? In other words, like how much do you lift the hood of the car and let your students see the engine that's running it? Because I always start my cure with this like, we're in the middle of this national shift in biology education, and I'm so excited about it. But I wonder how much they're connecting with that and how much they're just like, we don't care about biology education, Professor Steinhauer.
I totally show them everything under the hood. And I talk to them about the work that I do and how the work that they do supports the work that I do. And that's been a lot of fun. Some of our students have ended up shifting a little bit from the actual biology and into the education research, which has been delightful to see as well.
I'm kind of the opposite, and I think there's no wrong answer to this. But personally, you asked what do we do? I tend to speak to students in terms of their own interests and fairness and so forth. So, like, I do the test this way because I think it serves you better, and I sort of casually mention maybe, and I do research on this, dot dot dot. And if they're interested, they can pick up that. Otherwise, I just kind of let it go. But no wrong way to do it, I think.
And I do tell them very often, especially if I'm conducting research in that class, they're going through informed consent anyway, right? So they're seeing what's going on, but I tell them the reasoning. And the reasoning is I'm trying to improve their educational experience. And the same way they don't know how their bacteria are going to respond to certain things, I don't always know how my students are going to respond to different types of pedagogy, assessment, interaction, and that I'm just always trying to improve. I will also say that I typically will share when things are published and let them feel free to go and look up some of those papers. And that seems to have improved some self efficacy, both for my TAs who I publish with and for the students, seeing that those TAs are trying to get the actual research from the cures published.